tonight belonged to Jefferson wouldn't. She's done something that no American woman has ever achieved before.
Melissa Jefferson.
Melissa Jefferson.
Melissa Jefferson.
Melissa Jefferson.
Fastest woman in history. With that 1061.
Beats the Olympic champion who herself. That is a big win.
Melissa Jefferson Wooden.
Wooden is hanging on at the moment. The American has got it. And look at the time, 10:75.
Georgetown, South Carolina, a quiet coastal town where ambition rarely makes national headlines. Yet in its modest neighborhoods, a young Melissa Jefferson began shaping a story that would one day redefine American sprinting. Born on February 21st, 2001, Melissa grew up in a hard-working family that valued persistence and faith more than luxury. Her childhood was simple: school, chores, and endless runs through the back roads of Georgetown. At Carver's Bay High School, her natural speed drew early attention. With minimal facilities and no elite coaches, Melissa relied on determination, glamorous, small crowds, local rivals, and cracked surfaces. But they forged her character. Each race taught her discipline. Each setback built her resilience. Her raw speed eventually caught the eye of recruiters from Coastal Carolina University, a mid-tier NCAA Division I school with limited sprinting history. The offer wasn't flashy, but to Melissa, it meant everything. A real chance to prove herself beyond Georgetown. When Melissa Jefferson arrived at Coastal Carolina University, she didn't walk into a powerhouse. The facilities were modest, the track weather-worn, and the program had produced few national names. But that never bothered her. It reminded her of home. Coastal Carolina's sprint program was small, often overshadowed by larger universities with Olympic alumni. Yet within that quiet, low-pressure environment, Melissa found something priceless: time and space to grow. Her daily routine was relentless. Alarms rang before dawn, and by sunrise, she was already on the track, working on her starts, drive phase, and stride frequency. The workouts weren't glamorous, they were repetitions of fundamentals done to perfection. Under the guidance of dedicated coaches who saw potential beyond her current results, Melissa began transforming from a raw talent into a technically precise sprinter. Every week was a cycle of improvement: acceleration mechanics, block positioning, and mental discipline. Her coach at the time described her as obsessed with the small details. While others focused on top speed, Melissa studied videos of her races, noting how a fraction of a second lost at the start could cost her everything. It was during these college seasons that she started setting records. She became a Sun Belt Conference champion, broke multiple school sprint records, and earned All-American honors. Each performance was a statement that a small school could produce elite talent. Even as her times dropped, Melissa remained grounded. She spent evenings helping younger teammates with technique and recovery. She knew that her growth wasn't just about medals, it was about mastering consistency. Her training environment was humble: old weights, cracked tracks, and humid Carolina air, but it built her resilience. When rain poured, she still ran. When injuries lingered, she adapted. Those who trained with her remember her motto clearly: you don't need the best environment to become your best self. It wasn't a slogan, it was how she lived every day. As national scouts began to notice her times, Melissa still refused to be distracted. Her focus stayed on execution, not attention. She understood that real preparation doesn't happen under bright lights. It happens in silence, repetition, and sweat. By the time she graduated, Coastal Carolina had a new reputation, not for its size, but for the world-class sprinter it had produced. Melissa Jefferson had outgrown the program, but it had shaped her into the athlete who could stand against the best in the world. From a small college tucked along the Carolina coast, a future world champion was forged. Every repetition, every lonely practice, and every humble race built the foundation of the athlete who would soon shock the world. By 2022, Melissa Jefferson had done everything possible at the collegiate level. She'd broken school records, dominated her conference, and earned national collegiate recognition. But now, the next challenge awaits: the professional stage. That summer, she entered the U.S. Track and Field Championships, a field crowded with veterans, Olympic medalists, and rising stars. Few commentators mentioned her name in pre-race predictions. She was listed as a dark horse, not a threat. What followed changed her life. In the women's 100 meters final, she She exploded from the blocks and never looked back. The clock flashed 10.69 seconds. Wind assisted, but astonishing nonetheless. Melissa Jefferson, the quiet sprinter from coastal Carolina, had just won the national title. It was the performance that made the world take notice. Analysts called it one of the most surprising national upsets in recent memory. Within hours, her name trended across social media. Headlines didn't just say she won, they asked who she was. That victory earned her a coveted spot on Team USA for the World Championships. For the first time, she wore the American colors on an international stage, surrounded by athletes she once only watched on television. Her debut season on the Diamond League circuit was a crash course in global competition. She raced in Eugene, Lausanne, and Zurich, facing seasoned sprinters like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price and Elaine Thompson-Herah. Each race was a learning experience, and each finish line showed her how narrow the gap truly was. In interviews, Melissa never claimed surprise at her rise. She simply said, "I knew I could run with them. I just needed the opportunity." That quiet confidence separated her from the hype-driven noise of modern sports. Her mental shift during that season was profound. She stopped seeing herself as an underdog and started viewing herself as a contender. Every start became a statement that her lane belonged to her just as much as anyone else's. By the end of 2022, Melissa wasn't the unknown sprinter from a small college anymore. She was a national champion, a global competitor, and a name every commentator now had to mention. But behind the headlines, she remained unchanged. Same training schedule, same discipline, same focus on self-improvement. Fame hadn't softened her, it had sharpened her. Those who had seen her grow at Coastal Carolina weren't surprised. They knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. A rise that would lead her all the way to the 2024 Olympic Games. The world now knew Melissa Jefferson's name. What they didn't know was that her story was still in its early chapters, and her fastest days were yet to come. By late 2023, Melissa Jefferson was no longer the surprise name. She had become a consistent presence on the start line, the kind of athlete whose form demanded attention. Her 2022 breakthrough had opened doors, but now the world was watching to see if she could stay among the elite. That test came at the World Athletics Championships in Budapest. For the first time, she faced the global stage as an individual competitor, not just a promising sprinter, but a US champion expected to perform. The pressure was enormous, yet her demeanor never wavered. She advanced smoothly through the rounds, her starts sharper, her top-end speed cleaner. But in the 100-meter final, the experience gap showed. She finished outside the medals, clocking a time that didn't reflect her potential. Still, it wasn't defeat, it was education. Jefferson had seen firsthand what separated finalists from champions. In the 4x100-meter relay, she helped the team reach the final, though she didn't run the anchor leg. Watching her teammates take gold from the sidelines left a mark not of bitterness, but of hunger. That night, beneath the Budapest lights, she made herself a quiet promise. Next time, she would not be watching. The off-season that followed was a turning point. Back in South Carolina, her training grew more disciplined, more technical. Starts, drive phase, transition. Every fraction of movement was refined. Her coaches noticed the change. She wasn't chasing fame or validation anymore. She was chasing precision. By early 2024, that work began to show. In the US Olympic trials, she ran with purpose, balanced, powerful, confident. Her times were among the best of her career, earning her a spot in both the 100-meter and 4x100-meter relay for the Paris Olympics. For Jefferson, this wasn't just qualification, it was redemption. When the Olympics began, she approached every heat with calm determination. Gone was the nervous newcomer from 2023. The stadium noise, the cameras, the spotlight, none of it seemed to reach her. She was locked in, focused only on execution. In the women's 100-meter final, the air inside Stade de France felt electric. Jefferson settled into her blocks, her eyes fixed straight ahead. The gun fired. Her start was explosive, her rhythm perfect. She crossed the line in 10.93 seconds, earning the bronze medal. For a moment, she stood motionless, processing it all. She had just become an Olympic medalist. But her story in Paris wasn't finished. Days later came the 4x100-meter relay. This time, she was on the track and, crucially, part of the quartet that would deliver one of Team USA's finest performances. Clean baton passes, precise exchanges, and an unstoppable finish. When the anchor crossed the line, the board flashed USA gold. Tears filled her eyes as the anthem played. From a small-town runner to Olympic gold and bronze in 1 week, it was a moment built from years of discipline and lessons learned the hard way. The podium felt less like a destination and more like confirmation that her method worked. Her maturity resonated across the sport. Analysts noted how composed she looked under Olympic pressure, how her form seemed smoother, her execution more deliberate. Jefferson was no longer being introduced as a rising star, she had arrived. As the Olympic lights faded, Melissa carried 2 medals home, 1 bronze bronze, 1 gold, and something more valuable: perspective. She had seen the world's best, raced them, and proven she belonged among them. Paris didn't complete her story. It transformed it. The once underdog from coastal Carolina had evolved into a cornerstone of American sprinting, sharper, wiser, and hungrier than ever. And as 2024 ended, one truth defined Melissa Jefferson's journey. The fire that began in Georgetown had now become focus, and that focus was shaping a champion destined for greatness. The 2025 season began not with noise, but with quiet confidence. Melissa Jefferson had already proven herself an Olympic medalist. Now, she wanted to become undisputed. Every start line she approached that year carried an unmistakable energy, the look of someone who had figured it all out. Through the early Diamond League circuit, her performances spoke volumes. Victories in Doha, Stockholm, and Eugene showed a new level of consistency. Her drive phase looked effortless, her top speed controlled yet explosive. Each win reaffirmed what the world was beginning to realize: Melissa Jefferson wasn't chasing the spotlight anymore. She was defining it. Commentators began using words like dominant and inevitable. But to those who knew her, the formula hadn't changed. Early mornings, technical refinement, relentless focus. She wasn't reinventing herself, just perfecting what she already knew worked. As the World Athletics Championships in Budapest approached, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Jefferson entered as the favorite in both the 100 and 200 meters, a position once unthinkable for the girl who trained on cracked high school tracks in South Carolina. The women's 100 meters final became a moment of pure electricity. 8 of the fastest women on earth crouched into their blocks. The gun fired, and in less than 11 seconds, the hierarchy of sprinting changed. Melissa surged ahead cleanly, powerful through every stride, crossing the line in 10.61 seconds, a championship record. The stadium erupted. The clock confirmed what everyone felt. This was her moment. As she stood on the track, chest heaving, the roar from 60,000 spectators washed over her. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was recognition. The same athlete once dismissed as a college surprise had just stamped her name alongside the legends. Days later came the 200 meters, the event that would cement her season. The bend was flawless, her transition seamless. By the final 50 meters, no one was close. She crossed in 21.68 seconds. Another gold. Commentators called it precision sprinting, a display of power and grace rarely seen in the same race. The final act of the championship was the 4x100-meter relay. Team USA, anchored by Jefferson, delivered a near-perfect performance. Clean handoffs, fluid rhythm, and a finishing stretch that felt almost cinematic. When she crossed the line first, baton high, 3 gold medals now belonged to her. The crowd's reaction was thunderous. Cameras flashed from every angle as headlines lit up around the world. Jefferson completes historic triple. For American sprinting, it was a return to dominance. For Melissa, it was personal vindication, proof that patience and discipline win longer races than speed ever could. Later, standing beneath the lights during the medal ceremony, she smiled quietly as the anthem played. No theatrics, no chest beating, just a calm acknowledgement of the journey, from a small town track to the pinnacle of world athletics. When asked afterward how it felt to win it all, she simply said, "It feels earned." Those 3 words captured everything: the years of unseen effort, the self-belief that survived obscurity, and the understanding that true greatness doesn't arrive suddenly. It's built layer by layer. As 2025 ended, Melissa Jefferson stood not just as the fastest woman in the world, but as the embodiment of what quiet determination can achieve. Her story was no longer just about sprinting. It was about resilience, the kind forged in silence, proven under pressure, and crowned in gold. By the close of 2025, Melissa Jefferson's name was no longer mentioned alone. It was spoken alongside the giants of women's sprinting: Florence Griffith Joyner, Shelly Ann Fraser-Pryce, Elaine Thompson-Herah, Sha'Carri Richardson. She had earned her place in that conversation, not through hype, but through history. Analysts began drawing parallels. FloJo's 1988 world records still stood untouched, yet Jefferson's 10.61 from Budapest had drawn her within striking distance, the closest any American had come in decades. Her 21.68 in the 200 meters placed her among the top 10 all time. Speed was no longer a question. Shelly Ann Fraser-Pryce had ruled through longevity and precision. Elaine Thompson-Herah had mastered Olympic dominance. Sha'Carri Richardson had reignited American swagger. Jefferson, by contrast, represented quiet consistency, a disciplined force whose strength lay in control rather than charisma. Commentators noted how she bridged generations, carrying the technical refinement of past legends with the composure of a modern professional. Her start starts, mechanics, and execution had become case studies in American training programs. When asked about these comparisons, Melissa never engaged in superlatives. Her response was steady. "I'm honored to even be mentioned with them. But my job is to keep running." That humility became part of her identity, a reminder that greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply endures. In an era defined by personalities and media moments, Jefferson stood out by being grounded. Her focus stayed on the craft, not the cameras, not the headlines. And that, perhaps more than her medals, became the mark of her legacy. Now, she is not just chasing comparisons anymore. She has already joined the lineage, one built not only on speed, but on discipline, grace, and timeless purpose. With 3 golds around her neck and her name etched into record books, Melissa Jefferson stood at a crossroads, not of endings, but beginnings. At just 24, the question was no longer how far she had come, but how far she could still go. Analysts predicted she could shape the next decade of sprinting. Her technique, still improving, hinted at faster times ahead. The 2028 Olympics loomed, another chance to test the limits of human speed and her own endurance of greatness. Off the track, Melissa began mentoring young athletes, often returning to the same local fields where her journey began. She spoke less about medals and more about belief, the idea that success grows quietly, away from attention, nurtured by persistence. In interviews, she often said, "I don't run to prove people wrong. I run to prove that discipline works." That mindset turned her from champion to role model, an athlete defined not just by velocity, but by vision. As new challengers emerged, Melissa's story became a guiding light, proof that greatness doesn't require perfect conditions, only perfect effort. The cracked pavements of Georgetown had given way to the fastest tracks in the world, yet her heart remained rooted in the same soil. The world now watched with a single question: how far can she go? And in every stride, every measured breath, Melissa Jefferson seemed to answer with quiet certainty: as far as discipline can take her. When Melissa Jefferson returned to Georgetown, South Carolina, she wasn't just an athlete coming home. She was living proof of what belief could build. The same small-town streets that once echoed with her early strides now celebrated a world champion born from their soil. Schools painted murals in her honor. Young sprinters lined up on dusty tracks, trying to mimic her form, her focus. To them, Melissa wasn't a distant star. She was one of their own, a reminder that greatness doesn't always grow in the spotlight. Across America, her story became a symbol of possibility. She represented more than speed. She represented every young athlete training with limited means, every dream nurtured in quiet determination. Her journey showed that the line between local and legendary begins with belief. Analysts would measure her by medals and records, but her true impact reached deeper in the mindset she inspired. She taught a generation that patience is power and that consistency beats circumstance every time. On her last lap of the season, Melissa slowed her stride after the finish, lifting one hand skyward, not in triumph, but in gratitude. It was the same calm gesture she'd made in Budapest, in Paris, in every victory that mattered. And as the crowd stood to applaud, her legacy took its final shape, not just the fastest woman on the track, but the quiet embodiment of belief itself. By 2025, Melissa Jefferson's success on the track had begun to translate into financial power. Prize money from Diamond League victories, major championship bonuses, and performance incentives formed the foundation of her growing net worth. But it was her discipline in managing that success that set her apart from many young athletes. Endorsement deals soon followed. Sportswear giants, performance brands, and health companies lined up to work with the Olympic medalist. Her calm image, professionalism, and global appeal made her a valuable partner, and each contract added new layers to her financial portfolio. Her biggest leap came through her long-term sponsorship deals, which included appearance bonuses, championship incentives, and signature athlete agreements. These partnerships turned her from a rising star into a marketable icon, ensuring that her value extended far beyond race days. Unlike many athletes who spend quickly, Melissa approached wealth with the same discipline she brought to training. She worked with financial advisors, invested in stable assets, and focused on long-term security. Real estate became one of her early priorities, allowing her to build lasting value outside the track. She also launched small entrepreneurial ventures, including community-based fitness programs and youth sprint clinics. These weren't just income sources. They were investments in the next generation, rooted in the same streets where her own journey began. Her growing financial success never changed her lifestyle. She preferred quiet comfort over extravagance, choosing functional over flashy. Her spending reflected her personality, measured, purposeful, and grounded. By the end of 2025, Melissa Jefferson's wealth represented much more than numbers. It was a symbol of what consistency, discipline, and focus can build. From a modest upbringing in Georgetown to global stardom, she had crafted not only a legendary athletic career, but a secure and expanding financial empire. And as her story continued, one truth defined her approach to both racing and wealth. Greatness isn't just achieved on the track, it's built in every decision, every habit, and every quiet moment of discipline that follows.
Came out of her drive phase very smoothly, let her head come up by itself, and transitioned into her top speed, which is really good right now.
Melissa Jefferson Wooden.
She has just become the 4th fastest woman in history. Championship record for Melissa Jefferson Wooden.
She is dedicated, that she is loyal, that she is an inspiration.
Like, who is this girl? Like, who is Melissa Jefferson? And I feel like this time around, you know, I've grown so much in these past 3 years. I've learned a lot. I've made changes. I've made sacrifices. And, you know, being the U.S. champion today, even though I still hold 2022 really near and dear to my heart, being in this moment right now.